When we talk about mega projects, especially in the form of buildings, we often center around projects built on a massive scale to fit some opulent and very often non-essential objective. Especially in authoritarian states, it's not uncommon for a gigantic building to have been built by a dictator as a sort of tribute to themselves, something which will remind the population of their reign long after they are gone. Think of the Palace of Culture and Science in Poland's capital Warsaw, or the gargantuan Palace of the Parliament in Bucharest. These are both projects heaped onto the city skyline by authoritarian leaders, in the first case Stalin, the second Ceausescu, without there having really been a significant public demand for the project in the first place. On other occasions, even if the population are not overwhelmingly opposed to a given mega project, criticism may abound nonetheless in the event that the project is overly lavish or has no suitable purpose beyond a singular event. Think of massive football stadiums or immense convention centers, or even entire Olympic villages no longer fit for purpose after the games have concluded. But unlike such vanity projects and white elephants, there are likely very few who would oppose to the building of a brand new state-of-the-art hospital to service a nation's need. There are even fewer still who would do so in the case of a children's hospital, especially a badly needed children's hospital. Indeed, the building of the new children's hospital in Ireland's capital, Dublin, was something which had been called for a very long time and received much fanfare when it finally began construction in 2016. But with the project facing myriad woes amid astronomical costs, frequent budget overruns, chaos and confusion in its planning, and an opening date pushed back by several years, the hospital is now the focus of intense scrutiny and heavy criticism. So today we thought we'd take a look at the new children's hospital in the Dublin suburb of Rialto, which, without even being complete, has spiraled into both the most expensive hospital ever, as well as one of the most expensive buildings ever built. Imagine you're at your favorite cafe, sipping on coffee, catching up on some travel deals online. You found a killer price for that long-awaited holiday, but hold on. Did you know that websites can bump up the prices just because of where you're browsing from? Or maybe you visited that site before. Up go the prices because they know you want it. It's annoying. But that's where today's sponsor Surfshark swoops in to save the day. Surfshark is a VPN, meaning it covers your entire internet activity, encrypting your data, blocking ads, preventing those sneaky websites from tracking your every move. You could virtually travel the world and access content from anywhere without getting slapped with those location-based price hikes. Need a last-minute flight deal from a different country? No problem. Plus, you don't have to worry about counting your devices. One Surfshark account, unlimited devices, so that's nice. Plus, they got 24/7 customer support and a 30-day money-back guarantee, so nothing to lose. So, secure your digital life with Surfshark today. Go to surfshark.com/mega and use my promo code MEGA for 4 months extra. Thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring today's episode, and now back to it. First, quickly a few words about the health service in Ireland. Ireland has a dual system of healthcare comprising both public and private care. The Irish healthcare system has, at least until recently, been highly viewed domestically, with the Irish public generally reporting satisfaction with the health service and the provision of care available. A 2018 OECD survey found that a majority of Irish people, around 62%, were content with their public health system where they lived, although this still falls below the OECD poll average of 70%. With that said, it could be said that the opinion of the public is unduly lenient in this regard, since the insights provided by the data paint a very different picture. Extremely long wait times, overcrowding, and funding shortages are all common features of Ireland's healthcare system. Ireland struggles to hold on to domestically trained doctors, many of whom travel abroad to work in locations such as the US, Australia, and the UK. The Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland found that in 2022, 442 Irish doctors had been issued work visas for Australia alone, a worrisome figure given that only 721 new doctors had qualified in Ireland the previous year. The same report stated that of the surveyed figure, only 1 in 4 intended to return to Ireland, with most citing, quote, understaffing and overstretched workplaces within which extreme ways of working had become normal as the primary reason for their emigration. As such, Ireland relies on immigration to support its healthcare system, something which does not necessarily impact on the standard of care provided, but which is certainly a worrying phenomenon for any country with a high standard of education in healthcare, which Ireland is seen to have. In 2017, the country was found to have the longest hospital wait times in Europe, finishing last in a study of 36 countries. The problem has not seemed to have gotten better with time. In 2023, the average wait time for a hospital bed at Ireland's emergency units was found to be, on average, almost 12 hours. The wait time for children was even higher at an astonishing 13.5 hours. And the same year, Ireland was described as the worst in the developed world for digital health policy, being cited by the OECD as having greatly underdeveloped readiness for digital tools to transform healthcare, in spite of having one of the most digitally literate populations in the world. And still, in 2023, Professor Martin Curley, Professor of Innovation and Digital Health from Maynooth University, described Ireland's healthcare system as one of the lowest performing in the entire Northern Hemisphere. His opinion piece in the Irish Times pointed out that the Irish healthcare system was ranked 80th in the world in 2021, behind significantly less affluent countries such as Albania, Algeria, and Kenya. He further cited the massive wait times and the acute shortages of available beds in hospitals as some of the key issues facing healthcare in Ireland, as well as undeveloped public health coverage given Ireland's wealth, a system of coverage which compared poorly with similarly affluent nations of the EU. The Economist went as far as to cite Ireland's underperformance in primary care compared to the UK's NHS as a crucial concern in the divisive topic of whether or not Northern Ireland would, in theory, reunify with the rest of Ireland sometime in the future. And problems with primary care in Ireland are compounded by a simple lack of facilities in which to provide them. Ireland suffers from an acute shortage of available hospital bedding, with a 2023 report by the Economic and Social Research Institute finding that Ireland had around 1,000 hospital beds too few, as well as the highest reported occupancy rate of hospital beds in the OECD. The figure was 90%. The report further declared that insufficient bed capacity and high occupancy rates were linked to higher patient mortality, poor in-hospital outcomes, and risks to hospital staff welfare. So, given all of this, it is clear that Ireland's healthcare system could do with a very urgent shot in the arm. And where better to start than a brand new hospital built to service the needs of the young? But this is where the leaking Irish healthcare system meets another area of public policy on which Ireland falters pretty massively: urban development and construction. In Ireland, backlogs and planning restrictions are something which pull down building projects before they've even got off the ground. Ireland's construction has been hampered for several years, one reason for which was the exodus of construction workers from the country following the disastrous housing market crash of 2008, which hit Ireland particularly hard. Ireland has an ongoing issue with backlogs for planning permission, with the results being that any potential construction project, especially in Dublin, can take months or even years to be cleared to begin work, something which impacts heavily upon the availability of new housing in a country which badly needs new houses. This has resulted in one of the most crippling and persistent problems facing Ireland in the 21st century: an overwhelming shortage of accommodation. In July this year, a BBC report found that Ireland would need to build at least 35,000 new homes every year in order to simply meet the overwhelming demand. The same report indicated that the recommended figure would be more like 44,000, but that depending on migration streams into the country, this could rise to as many as 53,000. Each one of these figures greatly outweighed the government's meagre declared target of 33,000 homes for the coming few years, resulting in the Irish housing crisis being likely to continue unabated in the future. Ireland's lack of housing led to an explosion of homelessness. It was found that more than 14,000 people in Ireland were homeless in June of 2024, an increase of almost 14% on the previous year alone. By August, the figure had risen by a further 400 people. The homeless figure includes around 4,400 children and represents by some margin a record figure in Ireland's post-independence history. Moreover, the figure does not include rough sleepers, people in refuges for the abused, or Ireland's significant number of unaccommodated asylum seekers, rendering the true number of homeless people likely much higher. And all of this brings us back to that hospital. The building of the hospital stretches back a total of almost 13 years. In the wake of a number of independent reports citing the urgent need for a new paediatric hospital in Ireland, a proposal for its development was finally put forward by the then Minister for Health in 2011. In fact, the planning of the project dated back further still, with a plan for a children's hospital merging 3 individual existing sites being first proposed by paediatrics professor Brendan Drum of University College Dublin in 1993. However, the selection of a location and the establishment of a task force to oversee the project was not successful until the mid-2000s, and before a single stone had been laid, the hospital had already run afoul of Ireland's planning red tape. The proposal for the development was rejected by On Board Planala, Ireland's planning authority, in 2012, due to it being visually unappealing and detrimental to the historic character of the surrounding area. The project was finally given clearance in 2016, with the contract for its construction being awarded to BAM Ireland. This is a subsidiary of the Dutch construction firm Royal BAM Group. When construction began the same year, the company announced that the project was expected to cost around €650 million and would be complete within 4 years. The parameters of the new structure included over 7 stories with over 6,000 rooms, including 380 individual inpatient rooms, 60 critical care beds, and 93 day beds. Further, according to BAM, the site will occupy a total of around 160,000 square meters, with 22 advanced operating rooms comprising cardiac, neurosurgical, and orthopedic chambers, as well as a vast complex containing 14 courtyards and gardens and over 400 trees being planted. But despite the ambitious plans, the project was beset by difficulties from the outset. Only 2 years after construction had begun, the cost of building the hospital had already ballooned to €1.7 billion. Then Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar confidently announced that unless an asteroid struck the planet, the site would be complete in 2020. Despite this, no major asteroid has struck the Earth since 2013 and the hospital still hasn't been built. The outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic impeded construction, resulting in little progress for the following 2 years. The project's completion was shelved and pushed back to late 2022, with the costs also having increased to around €2 billion. Since then, the project has limped forward, accumulating more and more delays for which the government and the company responsible for construction have traded blame. The Irish government blamed BAM for the missing targets, claiming an absence of appropriate resourcing and a lack of responsible commitment to deadlines. BAM, for its part, cited various issues, such as frequency of design changes requested by the government as cause for the delays and mounting costs, and has taken the Irish government to court for a total of 2,782 claims, seeking over €700 million in restitution. With the disputes slowly working their way through the High Court concurrent to the building of the hospital, this has resulted in further backlogs, further delays, and more disputes. In May, the court seemed to lend credence to at least some of BAM's claims, recommending a compensation of €100 million by the government to the contractor for delays attributable to the client. The government rejected the recommendation, claiming that it would contest the claims further. The completion target for the hospital has now been pushed back so many times that its date of opening is just not very clear. In fact, the official website of the hospital does not even include mention of the date of completion, providing instead only select updates about the various hardware installations recently added to the site. In April of this year, with construction still ongoing, Ireland's Minister for Health confidently announced that he expected the hospital to be complete by the end of 2024. However, only a month later, in a hearing with the Public Accounts Committee, a parliamentary body responsible for overseeing public projects in Ireland, in May 2024, government representatives stated that they could no longer declare confidence in the contractor to complete the project, even in 2025. The chair of the committee later added that he did not expect the hospital to welcome patients until later still, in 2026. One of the attending members of parliament summed up the mood of a nation when he declared that the hospital had been a disaster zone for years. In spite of its massive cost and frequent overruns, it is likely that Ireland's government has no choice but to complete the hospital, given the vast expense already consumed and the ambitious commitments issued by successive Irish governments to completing the project. But with that figure having soared to over €2.2 billion, the new Children's Hospital sits comfortably among the most expensive buildings in history, its cost eclipsing megastructures such as Dubai's Burj Al Khalifa, Kuala Lumpur's Petronas Towers, and London's Wembley Stadium. In an action plan laid out for 2024, Ireland's National Health Service conceded that the delayed building of the new Children's Hospital would have, quote, a significant impact on the remainder of the capital programme and Capital Plan 2024, while committing a further €210 million to the project. In the meantime, the health system continues to flounder. Unsurprisingly, the chaotic nature of the building of the hospital has resulted not only in further backlogs to existing wait times, but also to lengthy waiting lists for specialised care for Ireland's children. Children with spinal conditions, in particular, such as scoliosis and spina bifida, which require skilled interventions, have seen their treatment greatly offset. And with those massive wait times showing no signs of abating, some parents have had no other choice but to seek treatment abroad in the absence of acute treatment options at home. In July 2024, it was revealed that hospital wait times were the longest in the recorded history of the state, with a mesmerizing 900,000 people waiting for treatment of some kind through the Public Health Service. In the last few months, it has seemed that the Irish government has changed tack in its discourse regarding the project. from deflecting blame for the massive delays toward the construction company responsible for building the site. Ireland's Taoiseach, or Vice Prime Minister Micheál Martin, and Minister for Health Stephen Donnelly have instead taken to insisting that the final result will justify the exorbitant cost of building the hospital. However, some, especially among the opposition, have reported that the hospital can no longer possibly justify the cost and chaos, and that the objective for the government should be accountability and damage limitation, as well as to accept the failure of the project. And if that weren't enough, questions have been raised whether, even in the unlikely best-case scenario of the hospital being completed without further delay, administrators will be able to find highly trained staff to work at the site. As mentioned before, Ireland's outward flow of qualified doctors is continuing, with shortages in the number of qualified staff capable of servicing Ireland's needs. And even if Ireland does succeed in stemming the flow of qualified medical practitioners to other countries, it remains difficult to tell whether it will be able to attract staff to the Children's Hospital due to its location. The main site of the hospital in South Dublin is in one of the most expensive living areas in all of Ireland, a country already experiencing an accommodation crisis and skyrocketing rent and house prices. In 2020, it was determined that a first-time buyer of an apartment in Dublin would need an income in excess of €120,000 per year. This would put buying property just within reach for Ireland's specialist medical practitioners, but outside the reach of entry-level medics and nurses. In theory, that would leave those working at the site dependent on either rental agreements or having to commute to work in a densely congested city with no metro system, and one over-reliant on its relatively small tram network and buses. Concern has been raised also about the relative absence of parking spaces in the projected plans for the hospital, with this potentially further impeding the practicalities for the workforce, even those on nighttime shifts. With construction ongoing, only time will tell if the project can be salvaged. In the meantime, the country continues to wait for its long-promised hospital, now comfortably one of the most expensive buildings in history.